So the mayor of Dearborn, Michigan, made some news recently. This is a predominantly Muslim community over there. He's a Muslim himself, and he refused recently to meet with Biden when Biden took his trip to Michigan. Now, the reason should be no shock or surprise to anybody why he refused to meet. Biden is currently in the midst of arming and funding Netanyahu and the Israeli government as they do a genocide in Gaza, a genocide and an ethnic cleansing. So this is a bridge too far for this Democratic Muslim mayor. And CNN invited him on to basically try to prod him and question him and play gotcha with him as to, the threat Trump faces, or the threat that Trump poses, I should say, to the Muslim American community. And I think this guy handles it masterfully. So let's dive in and we'll break down as we go.
Joining me now is Abdullah Hammoud. He's the mayor of Dearborn, Michigan, which is home to one of the nation's largest Arab American communities. Mayor, thanks for joining us. President Biden is in your state courting union members, but he did not meet with Arab Americans during this trip. Was this a missed opportunity?
I absolutely think it's a missed opportunity whenever dialogue can happen, constructive dialogue that can help save lives, because that's the conversation we want to have. And calling for a ceasefire and ending the bombing and unrestricted military aid to Israel, we want to save lives. We believe no innocent man, woman, or child should be killed.
And to that end, the White House says that it's deploying senior administration officials to Michigan this month to discuss a number of issues with community leaders there, including this war. If the White House does extend an invitation to meet, will you accept it?
For anybody who wants to have a conversation about how we change course, that's the only condition, that there has to be a willingness and an openness to change course on what's unfolding now. Secretary Blinken just last week said that the Middle East is the most volatile it's been in 50 years. And that's due in part because of this administration's decision making. So if they're willing to come to the table with an open mind on how to change course, that's a conversation and dialogue that we can partake in.
So you're saying that you really only want to sit down if they say in advance that they are willing to change their strategy. Is that what your position is?
If you had a disagreement with your congressional official and you said you wanted to voice your concerns, and if they said, hey, I'll come listen to you, but I'm never going to change my mind, I think you yourself would say, hey, you know what, let's just pass in this conversation and save both our times. But if there's a willingness and an openness to say, hey, you in Dearborn, you might know a little something. We come from these Arab countries that everybody keeps talking about online. The largest portion of the city of Dearborn is largely Lebanese immigrants, Palestinian, Yemeni, Syrian, Iraqi. In each one of these countries, we have lived through the firsthand accounts of apartheid, of occupation, of oppression, of bombardment, devastation, and bombing. And so we can speak from a firsthand accounts of what's actually unfolding on the ground.
Some Michigan Arabs and Muslims have launched a campaign, and they're saying abandon Biden, and they're urging members of their community to show up to the polls but not cast their vote for Biden. These efforts are also happening in other key states. This is, as I'm sure you know, going to be a very close election likely. Do you agree with this strategy, abandon Biden?
For me, that question has to be put back to the candidate, to President Biden. It's on the candidate. It's his responsibility to earn the trust and respect of the voters. I've run for office before. I've never pointed at the voters of my district and said, you're at fault if I'm not elected. In fact, it's me as the candidate. It's President Biden as the candidate to put forward a policy platform that is receptive to all of Americans. What we're asking for, a ceasefire, is not something that only the majority of Arab Americans and Muslim Americans support. In fact, over 60% of Americans support a ceasefire, over 80% of Democrats. And so for me, I would urge President Biden to heed the calls of Americans from coast to coast.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, certainly you want the president to change his position. I think one of the things that, and I know you've gotten a lot of questions about this, people are wondering about realistically, what is the alternative and what does that alternative mean for the Palestinian people? Does it worry you about what a Trump presidency could mean for those lives that you said earlier? You're concerned about each and every one of the innocent people who shouldn't die being saved.
Absolutely. I think Trump is a threat to American democracy. So the question should stand. What will President Biden do to prevent the unraveling of our American democracy? Why is being aligned with Benjamin Netanyahu and the most right-wing government in Israel's history worth potentially sacrificing our American democracy? I had a resident that came before a city council meeting who had lost over 80 family members in Gaza. And the question in everybody's mind is, while we send our condolences for your loved ones, we want to know how you're going to vote come November. And I think that's extremely dehumanizing to think of Palestinian lives only in the context of polls. Arab American lives and Muslim American lives outside of the context of just polls.
Well, yeah, I totally understand that. I think, but really what I'm wondering about is not about the polls, but do you believe genuinely that President Biden, I think the White House would say this, behind the scenes, that they're trying to put pressure on the Israeli government to reduce the loss of innocent lives? Do you believe that at all, or do you think that that's not happening?
I believe those are political talking points. There's never been a war in history in which 80% of the country is absolutely decimated, where 100% of the population has been displaced, and where 50% of all the deaths are children. That has never happened. For us, we want action, not lip service. If President Biden wants to take a firm stance, he can begin by restricting military aid to the state of Israel. He can begin by calling a ceasefire, because right now, nearly 200 civilians are killed each and every single day. These are tangible steps that can be taken, because what we understand is only diplomatic efforts can lead to lasting peace and justice.
All right, Mayor Abdullah Hammoud, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
He did an absolutely phenomenal job there. He did a phenomenal job there. To answer her question about, like, do you think, Biden's not pressuring Netanyahu? The answer is, of course he's not pressuring Netanyahu. We don't care about words or leaks to the media from favorable Biden sources. We care about actions. And the fact of the matter is, he hasn't cut off the money. He hasn't cut off the weapons. He's just engaged in some tut-tut finger wagging and please bomb more humanitarianly, and then Israel doesn't do it, and he proceeds to arm them and fund them. So, of course, his actions speak louder than his words. The idea that anybody could believe, like, oh, no, he's actually trying his best to reel in Netanyahu, that's not true. If he wanted to, he could end this thing today. Today he could. But he's not doing it. Now, by the way, the part of that's the most frustrating is the insistence from the CNN host that the onus is on these Arab American and Muslim American voters, that you have to vote for Biden, even if Joe Biden's policy directly led to the extermination of 80 of your family members in Gaza. You can't look at somebody whose family is being genocided and say, but Trump. That's not going to work simply from a human nature perspective. That's never going to work. That's never going to land. That's always going to be met with an eye roll. Because all of this scolding that you're reserving for Arab American and Muslim American voters, you could just as easily flip that and put the onus on Biden to stop the policy that is facilitating the genocide. But this is the way that the media works. Whether it's CNN or MSNBC or the nightly news, Fox News has their own set of problems. They're Republican cucks and Donald Trump cucks. There's no doubt about that. But CNN and MSNBC, they are definitely more sympathetic to the corporate Democrats. And that's why the spirit of the question is like, oh, but you're harming his reelection chances by doing it. No, he's harming his own reelection chances by continuing to snuggle up to Netanyahu and aid and abet a genocide and an ethnic cleansing. Guys, I want you to think about this for a second. If a genocide and an ethnic cleansing is not a red line to the media with their voter scolding, then there is literally nothing that would stop them from doing the voter scolding. If Joe Biden himself unleashed a nuke on Gaza, they would say, well, Trump would nuke both Gaza and Lebanon and Iran. So there's 3 places that are going to be nuked, so why won't you just accept the one nuke? Again, the gravity of the situation on the ground, the colossal death toll, 30,000 dead innocent civilians. And their response is like, well, how could you not vote for Biden? How could you not vote for Biden? The question should be put to Biden and his team. How could you lose this key, crucial demographic for the Democrats? How can you alienate them so much that they're now doing a Never Biden campaign? How could you have possibly screwed this up so bad that the swing state of Michigan, which is absolutely vital for you, you're pissing it away? For what? To allow Netanyahu to kill thousands more children and carpet bomb them? Is it worth it? Is that worth it? Unbelievable. So they tried to flip the narrative. They tried to blame him. They tried to blame Arab Americans and Muslim Americans. Are you guys being unreasonable? And the reality is the only one being unreasonable here is Joe Biden. The only one being unreasonable is Joe Biden. He could change course. He could change course at any time. He could cut off the money. He could cut off the weapons. He could allow a condemnation through with the United Nations. Right? God forbid he was base enough to actually sanction top Israeli officials, not just the virtue signaling for illegal settlers in the West Bank, right? Sanction Netanyahu, Smotrich, Ben-Gvir. By the way, there was a report that Biden was considering sanctioning both Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, but he didn't do it. which goes to show you he still doesn't get it at this late date. He still doesn't get it. You know, he's caving to the power of the Israel lobby. And to one extent or another, he is a committed Zionist himself. But he doesn't realize just how big of a problem this is with him, particularly when it comes to Arab Americans and Muslim Americans, and also when it comes to young people. These are crucial demographics for any Democrat to win the White House. He's pissing it away. And instead of the media putting pressure on Biden to change his position, which would help, by the way, if they did that, they're pressuring Arab Americans and Muslim Americans to shut up and fall in line anyway, even if you lost 80 family members in Gaza as a direct result of the weapons Biden is providing to Netanyahu. Well, piss right off with that, man. I think this guy handled it phenomenally well. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.